All right, let's dive deep into ancient Greece today. We're going to meet a philosopher who really shook things up, Protagoras. So picture this: bustling city-states, epic poems, and debates about, well, just about everything. And Protagoras, he was right in the middle of it all, a pre-Socratic thinker who got labeled a sophist. Now, that word, it might sound a bit suspicious, like some kind of intellectual trickster, but let's unravel what being a sophist really meant back then.
Yeah, it's interesting to consider that sophists were actually highly respected teachers in ancient Greece. They trained citizens in the arts of rhetoric and argumentation, crucial skills for thriving in Athenian democracy.
So they were kind of like the lawyers and politicians of their time, helping people hone their skills for public life.
Precisely. And Protagoras was considered a leading figure among them, so much so that he earned the title Father of the Professional Sophist.
That's quite a reputation. He must have been incredibly sharp.
Yeah.
What made his ideas stand out from the crowd?
Well, Protagoras is most famous for a statement. It still sparks debate even today. Man is the measure of all things.
Man is the measure. That's the kind of phrase that gets you thinking. It sounds both profound and a bit puzzling.
Right. And unpacking what Protagoras meant by this, well, that's going to be a key part of our deep dive today. I think it will challenge some of your assumptions about how we perceive truth and reality.
I'm ready to have my mind bent. But before we jump into the philosophy, can you paint a picture of Protagoras the person? Where did this revolutionary thinker come from?
Well, there's a captivating story about how another famous philosopher, Democritus, he discovered Protagoras working as a porter, someone who carries goods for a living.
Really? So Protagoras wasn't born into some elite philosophical family. He had humble beginnings.
Exactly. Imagine this. Protagoras was simply tying bundles of wood, and Democritus, a renowned lover of mathematics, he saw something extraordinary in the way he was doing it.
Hold on. He spotted mathematical genius in how someone tied wood.
Yes. Democritus recognized Protagoras' intuitive grasp of geometry, his understanding of shapes and proportions. He saw potential that others missed and decided to take Protagoras under his wing, to become his mentor.
Wow, that's an incredible story of hidden talent and mentorship.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Protagoras, despite having this brilliant mathematician as his mentor, he didn't believe that math was the key to understanding the world around us.
That's right. Protagoras felt that mathematics, while elegant, it wasn't sufficient to grasp the nuances of human experience. He was far more fascinated by questions of virtue, political life, and whether virtue could be taught, issues that are still debated today.
It seems Protagoras felt that the neat logic of math wasn't enough to address the messy reality of human life. He was drawn to those big, enduring questions, the ones that we still grapple with.
Absolutely. And Protagoras was a pioneer in exploring these topics. He even delved into orthopoeia, which basically means the correct use of words. It was like the ancient Greek version of grammar and vocabulary.
So he was a master of language, which I imagine was pretty useful in the legal arena.
You got it. Remember those sophists we talked about? They prepared citizens for public life. And in Athens, that meant being able to argue your case persuasively. Protagoras' expertise in language would have been invaluable for that.
This is painting a picture of Protagoras as a very practical, human-centered thinker. But we can't avoid that mysterious phrase any longer. Man is the measure of all things. I'm ready to dive into that philosophical riddle.
Let's do it. That phrase is really the key to unlocking Protagoras' thought and understanding why his ideas are still so relevant today.
Okay, so lay it on me. What did he mean by man is the measure?
Protagoras was grappling with the very nature of truth. His argument was that there isn't one single absolute truth that exists out there, independent of human perception.
That's a pretty bold claim. So is he saying truth is relative?
Yeah.
It depends on the individual.
In a way, yes. Protagoras believed that what we perceive as true, well, it's shaped by our individual experiences and perspectives. Take the simple example of two people experiencing the weather differently.
I can see where he's going with this. Like one person might be freezing their butt off, while someone else thinks the temperature is perfectly comfortable.
Exactly. Who's right in that situation? Protagoras would argue there isn't an objective answer. It all comes down to each person's perception.
So does that mean there's no such thing as objective truth at all? Is it all just a matter of opinion?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, and where the debates around Protagoras' ideas start to heat up. He wasn't saying that all views are equally valid, or that we can just throw out the distinction between truth and falsehood. He emphasized that some viewpoints can be harmful, while others are beneficial.
Okay, that makes sense. It's not about saying anything goes, but rather recognizing that our understanding of the world is shaped by individual experience. There's still a need for judgment and discernment.
Precisely. And that's where Protagoras' role as a teacher comes in. He saw himself as guiding his students to develop good judgment, to be able to distinguish between harmful and beneficial views, essentially to learn virtue.
So it's not just truth is whatever you think it is,
Yeah.
but more like let's figure out how to think well and make good judgments based on our individual perspective.
You've got it. And that leads us to another fascinating aspect of Protagoras' thinking. He's closely associated with the idea of disoilogoi, which translates to opposing arguments.
So he's encouraging people to consider different sides of an issue, to see things from multiple perspectives.
Absolutely. This focus on individual perception, well, it naturally led Protagoras to champion the idea of disoilogopratesima, the importance of considering opposing arguments. He believed that to truly understand a topic, you need to be able to engage with different viewpoints and weigh the strengths and weaknesses of each argument.
That sounds like the foundation of critical thinking. It seems like Protagoras. He was all about encouraging people to think for themselves, to engage in thoughtful debate, and to grapple with different viewpoints. It's no wonder he had a reputation for being a bit of a radical, challenging the very idea of absolute truth, and urging people to question everything. That would definitely shake things up.
You're catching on. And it wasn't just in ethics and politics that Protagoras pushed boundaries. He also wrote a book titled On the Gods, in which he expressed agnosticism.
Agnosticism. So he wasn't sure if gods existed. That must have been a pretty controversial stance in ancient Greece.
That's right. He stated that he couldn't know for sure whether gods existed or not, which was a bold statement in a society where religion was so deeply intertwined with everyday life.
Wow, I can only imagine the reactions he got to that.
It probably didn't make him the most popular guy in town, but it speaks to his intellectual curiosity and his willingness to tackle the big questions, even if it meant challenging the status quo.
It makes you wonder what other unconventional ideas he explored. What else did he write about?
Unfortunately, most of Protagoras' writings have been lost to time. It's a real shame, because we only have fragments and secondhand accounts to piece together his thought.
Oh, that's a bummer. I'd love to read those lost works. It's like we're missing out on a whole chapter of intellectual history.
I know. But we do know the titles of some of his other works, which offer us tantalizing clues about the breadth of his thinking. For example, he wrote Art of Heuristics, likely a treatise on argumentation.
That makes sense, given his reputation as a master debater. And his emphasis on disoilogo, it seems arguing effectively was central to his philosophy.
Right, and then we have these intriguing titles like Imperative, On Ambition, On Those in Hades, On Virtues.
Wait a minute. On those in Hades, was he speculating about the afterlife? What kind of ideas could he have been exploring there?
It's a fascinating question. We can only speculate, but it suggests that Protagoras wasn't afraid to delve into some pretty profound topics.
It's amazing that we're getting these glimpses into Protagoras' mind through these scattered fragments and stories. He sounds like a true intellectual giant.
He absolutely was. Even though we don't have the complete picture, what we do know, well, it reveals a thinker who was deeply engaged with the human condition, exploring questions about knowledge, perception, and the world around us.
And here's the thing. Even though he lived over 2,000 years ago, his ideas still resonate with us today. Maybe even more so in our current world.
I couldn't agree more. In this age of information overload and constant bombardment with different perspectives, Protagoras' views on truth and perception offer valuable insights for navigating the complexities of modern life.
So we've journeyed from Protagoras' humble beginnings as a porter to his provocative philosophy. We've explored his ideas about truth, his focus on critical thinking, and even his willingness to question the existence of gods. But what does it all mean for us here and now?
That's the big question, isn't it? What does Protagoras' famous statement, "Man is the measure," what does it mean for you? In a world overflowing with information and competing viewpoints.
It's a lot to unpack. Does it make decision-making more challenging, knowing that there might not be a single right answer? Or does it offer a sense of freedom? Recognizing that we each have the power to shape our own understanding of the world.
Those are some great questions to consider. And here's another thought. Could Protagoras' philosophy be a call for greater empathy and understanding? If truth is relative to individual experience, shouldn't we be more open to hearing and respecting other perspectives, even if we disagree with them?
That's a really insightful point. Protagoras' ideas, while challenging, well, they can be seen as a framework for fostering a more tolerant and understanding society. a society where we're able to engage in respectful debate and learn from each other, even when we see things differently.
Exactly. He might be urging us to consider that our own perspectives, while valid, they're just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
It's like he's giving us this philosophical toolkit for navigating a world that's becoming increasingly complex and diverse. Maybe man is the measure. It isn't about claiming there's no truth at all, but rather a reminder that our individual perspectives are always shaping how we see that truth.
I think that's a really powerful way to frame it. Protagoras might be encouraging us to acknowledge the limitations of our own viewpoints and to embrace the richness that comes from engaging with different perspectives.
It's a bit ironic, isn't it? This guy who sometimes portrayed as a radical skeptic might actually be pointing us towards a more humble and empathetic way of understanding the world.
That is a fascinating paradox, perhaps by acknowledging the subjective nature of perception. Protagoras was laying the groundwork for a more nuanced and compassionate approach to dialogue and understanding.
Even after this deep dive, I still feel like Protagoras remains a bit of an enigma. We've explored some of his key ideas, but so much of his work is lost to history. It's like we're looking at a beautiful mosaic, but some of the tiles are missing.
That's a great analogy. And it's true, there's still so much we don't know about Protagoras. But even these glimpses we have, through fragments and accounts from others, well, they offer us a window into the mind of a truly innovative thinker.
And a figure who, despite living thousands of years ago, still has a lot to teach us today about how we approach knowledge, truth, and even our interactions with one another.
I think that's a great takeaway from our deep dive. Protagoras challenges us to think critically, to embrace diverse viewpoints, and to recognize the role that our own perceptions play in shaping our understanding of the world.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up our exploration of Protagoras. He was a captivating figure who certainly sparked debate in his own time, and his ideas continue to challenge and provoke us even today.
Absolutely. And hopefully this deep dive has encouraged you to engage with some of those big questions yourself. What does it mean for you that man is the measure? How does that shape your approach to understanding the world and engaging with others?
Those are questions worth pondering, for sure. So to all our listeners out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those intellectual fires burning. You never know what thought-provoking insights you might uncover.